Pearl arrived just months after Ty West's sex to tell the story of a teenage girl who dreams of stardom at the tail end of World War I. But of course, she's also extremely unhinged, so let's see how the surprising prequel to X turned out. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Hey, happy New Year, I suppose.
I mean, Tim, they're gonna get this episode for like at least like 3 or 4 weeks.
It still counts. People probably still nestling in and getting all comfy in 2023.
I imagine this will go out after the Megan episode. I think. I think. Assuming all goes to plan and we get to that timely fashion.
Yes, if all goes to plan.
If all goes to plan. But yes, welcome everyone. This is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we talk about a horror movie we've watched, and we're finally crossing off Pearl, which has been on the to-do list for ages. The reason why we didn't do this when it came out is because the US release was in like September, and the UK release, well, technically it's still not happened yet. Basically, I used a VPN to watch it on iTunes. So,
my God,
it's getting a release in March, I believe. So we ain't waiting that long.
Hell no.
So we're here. We wanted to cross off. So yeah, this is a prequel to X, which came out last April-ish, April, May. And it's the story in 1918 of Pearl, obviously, the character who was an elderly woman in X, and obviously now we're getting her kind of origin story, as it were. We'll start spoiler free.
Not elderly in this, I'll tell you that much.
That's correct, yes. She's about, give or take, the same age that Maxine was in X. Give or take.
Give or take, yeah.
Give or take, yeah. So we'll start spoiler free. We'll give you a warning before we get to spoilers. Don't you interrupt me when I'm trying to give the spoiler speech again, son of a bitch. So,
did I do something wrong?
if you can blubber the way that Mia Goth can blubber, then I'll respect it, but I don't think you can. So, yeah, well, usually when we'll do a sequel, I'll say, oh, there'll probably be some spoilers for the previous movie. But given this is a prequel, it's a bit weirder, so we'll try and just not spoil X either when we're doing spoiler-free. But, we'll get into all the details after spoilers. But, basic gist is that she's living on the same farm that she ultimately will be living on in X. And she has a German mother who is very strict. Doesn't really have time for any of Pearl's daydreaming. She's like, nope, we were on a farm, you help milk the cows and pluck the chickens and whatever else we do.
Feed the gator.
Does she know about it? Does the mum know about the gator? I don't actually know if
That's
she does.
a good question, I'm not sure.
But yes, there's a gator in the lake, much like X. And yeah, so like ultimately it's about this young woman who dreams of being a movie star. It's 1918, the end of the First World War. Films at this point are silent films. It's early days, but she really likes dancing in films, so she daydreams a lot about that. And it's about her wanting to try and break away from her controlling mother and escape and be a star. She wants to be a star, so it's all about her dreams and ambitions. But of course you're thinking, it's a horror movie though, right? Yes, it is. Don't worry.
I was just about to ask.
She eventually does start, she seems a bit unhinged at times, and then eventually, she will snap and do some things, which definitely put it into the horror category. Don't worry. So there you go. That's the just a bit, and that's not really a spoiler because, in X, the whole thing was that she was kind of, murderous.
Yeah.
as you do, She has that kind of X factor, if you will. So there you go. But yeah, Tim, what do you think of Pearl?
So I actually liked it quite a bit, and it's kind of interesting because this is the second time I've watched it. I saw it when it was in theaters, and I think I was a little cooler the first time I saw it, which I think there's kind of two specific reasons for that. One was I saw it right after seeing Barbarian, and I really love Barbarian, and it was you know, something that was really like exciting and new and fresh. So no offense to Pearl, there's a lot of good qualities and stuff about it, but I think when I left the theater, it just didn't give me that same high as Barbarian. So I think that made me feel a little bit cooler on it. And then also, I really, really like X, and this is a very different movie than X. So, and it's kind of funny because I've listened to podcasts and stuff where people have talked about both movies, and I do feel like I see a lot of people that are either like Team X or Team Pearl. Like there's some people that like love one or love the other, which I totally understand, because they're very different things. Like X is kind of riffing on that whole like 70s kind of grimy, sleazy like exploitation kind of grindhouse movie, while this is obviously doing like very like old school, like I don't even know like what time period you'd call these movies. Obviously it takes place in like 1918, but
I mean, to put it in sort of perspective, it's intentionally very vivid, so it's got a sort of Technicolor. Even though it's not really Technicolor, it looks kind of Technicolor, and it's like visual style, and it's got like a very orchestral, in-your-face like score that is very sweeping, and like it sort of like even takes like horror moments and applies like old school like score to it, like old school like 30s 40s score,
like like very like old school like MGM kind of I don't, it's not exactly like Wizard of Oz, but that's kind of like the closest thing I can think to compare it, because I don't have much time frame from like this kind of era of movies, except for like like old black and white horror movies, obviously. But
much like X was doing a riff on the 70s, and it was styled like that, it was shot like one. It was very gritty, a lot of grain, the way the camera like sort of moved around and was edited, all very much of the time period. I would say that this still feels more modern than a classical movie, but it definitely had like a lot of stuff in the in the color schemes, in the music. The way the characters talked was very old school movie style.
Yeah. And so I think like when I first left the theater, like that stuff didn't play as much to me, but watching it the second time actually I think was a lot warmer on it, and I kind of appreciated that more of what it was going for, which again, it's trying to be something different, and is kind of homaging this different era of movies, which is kind of cool. And especially in horror movies, I feel like that's not a typical thing that we really see. So I admire the uniqueness to it. But I mean, it's hard to argue that Mia Goth doesn't just absolutely like lose herself in this role. Like, she is really great as Pearl. Like, I would find it really hard. I mean, I guess probably some people don't like it, but I think she's great. And like there's plenty of lines, and I think the big thing is like the monologue at the end that a lot of people were talking about after seeing the movie. But I mean, she's great at this as this character, and it's just a really interesting like character study. I think I think maybe it might it's not like super long, but maybe for some people it might take a little while for the horror to kind of start, but I think it's well earned, and the horror stuff works for me. I think it's pretty cool, and just kind of like outside of the film itself, it's just really interesting to kind of look at these movies and examine them, whereas not even a year ago, like, well, not sorry, well, let's say about like a year ago, like most people didn't even have any idea that this was a thing that's coming, and now we have like a bona fide like franchise on our hands. Like they snuck in like 2 movies out of nowhere like last year, which is just I'm sure it's not like it's never been done before or whatever, but it's not something you really see. And then we have a new movie coming, I think this year, unless I don't know if there's unless it's 2024 or whatever, but I don't know, I think it's cool the way they went about, and they're just like, as they're making one movie, they're like, hey, let's decide to make another one, and it's interesting to if you look at the movies compared to each other, and how they kind of complement each other, and how very different they are. So thumbs up for me.
The third one is called Maxine. I'm not sure exactly when it's meant to be released, but that was announced a little bit after the fact, and that actually is more of a real sequel, in the sense that it it's after X came out, and even after Pearl came out, they said, okay, you know what, let's greenlight a sequel.
Yeah.
Pearl's kind of a weird thing because it was basically just they got to the end of making X. X hasn't come out yet, and they said, let's shoot another movie. And I think one of the things that surprised me about this film watching it is that, you know, it's set in 1918, is that there was a lot more. I mean, it's not like a ton. Like, I'm sure if you add them up, it's not actually that much. But they had to recreate an older time period for this movie. And there was a couple of scenes where Pearl goes to town and you see like a street, and you see, you know, there's at least one car in the movie of the time period, and it's, you know, super old school. Like, it had a bit higher production value than I think I was expecting, given that it was I mean, I don't want to say on a whim, because movies just don't happen on a whim, but relative to most movies, this was on a whim. It was like, let's just do something fun whilst we're still around it, because, you know, it's set at the same house for the most part, and the farm and whatnot. But
I could be wrong, but I think like they had like, you know, the crew and the sets, and I think, you know, Ty West and Mia Goth were talking a lot about the character, and they, you know, as they were kind of informing the character, they came up with his backstory and then ended up writing this together. And then you know, it was just like, yeah, like you said, like almost, yeah, like on a whim, like just being like, hey, like, why not just make it?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, yeah, it was fun. The money came from somewhere. It's not just like it's not like they did a few extra weekends.
Yeah.
Oh, it was you, was it, Tim?
Yeah, Ty called me up. I was like, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so
let me dip into Patreon money.
It's, you know, it's just a fun little idea that it comes a bit more organically than just having a prequel for prequel's sake, and I think that's one of the interesting things about watching it is.
Like, imagine them doing this on a Marvel movie, like Kevin Feige's like, hey, what if the Hulk actually did his own thing?
Because I mean, I like the movie too, and I think one of the interesting things about watching it is that I don't tend to like prequels. Prequels usually annoy me, right? Because most prequels suck, right? There's very few that aren't, right? Better Call Saul's like the one big, like, yeah, that's good, that's damn good, but most prequels, they fall into this trap of it's just about teasing things that we recognize or know, and it's just about you know, it's kind of all the worst things about legacy sequels where they just like live to reference the first movie, but it's
constant winks and yeah,
but it's even more annoying because it's like winks and nudges that are, you know, because they're like, oh, we're not supposed to, even the characters are meant to know about this yet, wink wink, you know.
Yeah, and the worst ones are like, you know, overly explaining stuff that like no one ever had questions about, like,
yeah,
hey, why does this character wear a bow tie? Like, all right, well, you know, when they were a kid they got hit with a bow tie. You're like, you know, it's like dumb shit like that.
Yeah. And I've not even seen Solo, but the fact that they felt the need to explain why he's called Solo, as if most people just didn't just assume that was his name, it's baffling. So just the stupid shit like that. And I think this movie, because it was made by the creators before the original film that it's a prequel to even came out, like, I feel like they didn't know what. Yeah, I mean, they could maybe guess, but they didn't know what people were going to latch on to. They didn't know what people were going to meme or reference more than other scenes. You know, which particular things were going to stand out. They had to just do it based on what was important to the writing and making the movie. So it inherently makes anything that's in this that's teasing or like ties into something in X feel more organic and feel more natural. There's maybe one slight exception that I didn't like, but for the most part, anything that does thematically tie to X felt really like, oh, that feels cool. It feels like it's in the same world. It feels like thematically it's relevant, but it doesn't feel like you're beating me over the head with oh, that's where she got that locket from. That, you know, like there's like almost none of that. It's all just the character building and building her up into what she is, and sort of you can imagine her becoming eventually the old woman in Pearl, which is why it's not a, you know, spoiler to say she survives this, because obviously she's in X. So no,
they're two extremely different movies, and really they, you know, stand on their own very well.
Which makes me fascinated by about what Maxine's going to be, because you know, if X is this very 70s grind, like given the logo for Maxine, all I can imagine is like a neon filled like 80s style movie, and I'm excited for that. Yeah, give it to me.
Yeah, I'm really interested.
Yeah, and then maybe in, like, you know, 25 years they can do the Dark Pearl Returns, and it's like old age Mia Goth and like present, assuming she doesn't die at the end of Maxine, because I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's like a thing I was thinking about too, is like, if, you know, if they really like this Pearl character, I mean, you have
Well, actually, now I'm thinking about it. It's not actually Pearl that's in Maxine. It's this Mia Goth's younger character from X that's in. But you know what I mean? Like, regardless.
Yeah, but like, you know, if they, you know, it does feel like, you know, they're trying to kind of make a franchise out of this world or whatever, which if they keep being good, you know, I'm totally okay with. And yeah, if they really like Pearl and want to latch onto her, I mean, yeah, they have like what, about 50 something years between Pearl and X, that where if they want to do more, yeah, they could.
Oh, true. Yeah, if they want to go back and do more Pearl specific movies, yeah, they could do that. I think what's interesting to me though is that even with a third one announced, it still doesn't feel like a cash grab to me. It still feels like it feels like a group of filmmakers just making something because they want to make it and not for any other reason. It doesn't feel like Maxine's happening. I mean, sure, X did relatively well, and I think Pearl did okay. I don't think it's happening because A24 on the phone and go, Ty, we did another hit. Ty, we're going to throw money at you. Make us another Pearl and X movie. I don't think it's that. I think they do well enough that the studio are happy to fund it, but I think it feels like Ty West and Mia Goth are just like, let's make another one. Let's go on. And that's far more interesting and less egregious to me than give us Fast and the Furious 25, please. You know, so... I mean, yeah, maybe if they keep going and we end up with like 7 of these, it might start to feel a bit weird. But these two feel so distinctly different that a third one that again promises to feel different just based on these two. Like, yeah. I think it's like, you know, it's a compliment to say that like one of the biggest reasons, you know, that I'm excited for this next one is because I want to see how it's going to be different, like what they're going to do, like, because at this point you have, you know, two, you know, very like time period specific movies that are doing like two very different things. So it's like, I want to keep seeing. We said how the different styles a big asset, and it's not doing too many prequely things that feel forced. The other big strength is absolutely that it's different. It's not trying to be a slasher movie like X was. It's a slow burning film building up to the main character becoming more, you know, murderous and snapping. It couldn't be more different from X, despite feeling very much like it belongs in the same world. So, you know, and even just starting on a similar shot, looking through the barn doors, but it's more vivid and colorful, and the green of the grass really pops. The blue of the sky is like this beautiful, tranquil, old school looking shot, and then we go into the cynicism as the movie goes on. So, I had a good time. If you're asking, like, you know, what do I prefer? Do I prefer X or do I prefer Pearl? Do I come down the side of that debate? I mean, yeah, like I think I prefer X a bit, but like I don't think it's by that much. Like, because I think this is a really strong, very different film that adds to my enjoyment of X. Mainly because it is so different. So, I think on my first watch through, I probably would have said like, oh no, I like the X way better. And then after watching it again today, I think I still prefer X, but I think it is definitely less of a gap. Like, I appreciate it a lot more on the second watch, and it'd be like, oh yeah, no, I actually really like them both. I probably prefer X a little bit, but I appreciate what each one is doing. And, you know, to give it a positive that I do think it has over X, is I would say Mia Goth's performance in this is better. Like, as far as the performance goes, she gets to just, like, act her ass off in this. Like, this is like a... I mean, it's no wonder that she's behind the conception of this, because this is, like, made for the main character. The main actor in this gets to just act and monologue for minutes on end at one point. Like, this is an actor's showpiece of a movie.
No, I definitely agree with that. Like, in X, I honestly, like, I mean, maybe it's a little bit informed after having seen the movie, but while I was first watching X, I wouldn't even have picked Mia Goth as, like, being the main character. Like, you know, it's a small ensemble cast, but there was a couple people that I kind of thought, you know.
No, I agree. I wouldn't have necessarily thought she was going to be the final girl in X for a while, but then also I wouldn't have... Like, even after watching the movie, I wouldn't even necessarily say that she was my favourite of the cast in X. She was really good, and obviously she's playing two roles, which is a big ask, and all the rest of it. But it's but that movie's good because it has such a good ensemble. Like, they're all kind of likeable characters that are kind of bouncing off each other. There's a lot of wit in X.
Remember that was Jenna Ortega was an X?
I do remember that, yes.
Like, isn't that like crazy? Like she was in X, Scream, and like, you know, not something that you enjoy, but Wednesday was something that a lot of people seem to like. But like that's kind of like, you know, a pretty big like year for
she's
horror
going to be.
things she was in.
I think there's a couple of actors like that who just seem to have all of a sudden become like not scream queens
They're
necessarily,
just like a
but
thing.
yeah,
now,
like in 1 year, Jenna Ortega's went from being almost no one to like, oh, she's a recognizable actor in horror stuff now, and she's in at least one more Scream movie, so
yeah,
and probably season 2 of Wednesday, unless Netflix
Probably,
cancelled it. Although Netflix are cancelling everything left and right, so who knows?
Did you end up? I assume you didn't watch the whole show, but did you watch like the first episode to review?
I did watch the first episode of Wednesday.
You must have hated it, I imagine.
I mean, it wasn't as bad as I thought the plot and like most of the supporting cast were but I thought she herself was good, and I thought she bounced off really well with her roommate.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, the line Wednesday, you almost had attempted murder on your on your like permanent record. How does that make you feel? Humiliated. People will know I failed to get the job done. I mean, that's a funny line. Like, what?
That's good.
I can't.
Honestly, like, I wish though, because we actually watched the whole thing, and I wasn't like super into it. My wife liked it a bit more than me, but like, yeah, I wish there was more humor like that. Like, it felt like, you know, it was going a lot more for like the CW kind of angles.
Well, did you notice who the showrunners were?
It was like something Miller and was it Alfred Go or something like that? I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name.
I'll go off and Miles Miller.
So they I don't know the exact shows, but they did some DC show, right? Or is it all the DC shows? I don't know.
No,
Are they like the Smallville?
They did one. They did Smallville.
Oh, okay. That's why it's familiar. All right.
It's literally just Smallville. They didn't do anything else. I mean, technically they were working on the Aquaman spin-off, but it never happened. But I mean,
oh jeez, yeah. Well, hopefully James Gunn can get on that and right that ship.
Oh dear. So yeah, but Pearl's very good. So I guess we'll give a spoiler warning, and we'll get into Pearl and all the juicy details.
It makes sense to go on a little bit of a DC tangent because, you know, pearls are so important in DC lore.
Well, yes, they always fall to the ground in Crime Alley on the night that the Waynes are taken from their mortal coil. Yes. So I want to give a shout out to maybe just the perfect. So the one thing I didn't like in terms of a reference or a wink to X was when she eventually goes to, because the whole movie she's wanting to go to this audition for a dancing show thing, and she goes to the audition, she does a dance, and the judge after says, you know, we're looking for something different, we're looking for someone with the X factor, and I wouldn't say it feels forced because I think it fits in the context of the scene, but I was hurt that they actually said it out loud because I thought the visual of the start of the scene was perfect, which was her,
she steps on the
X, yeah, there's her mark on the stage is an X on white tape. Which, I mean, typically, most marks I've seen on stages and like TV productions tend to just be either a line or, if anything, I would say they were a cross more than an X, but it's completely believable that someone would just angle it differently, right? Because it's the same purpose. Sure. Works the same. So just this visual of her stepping onto an X was like, oh my God, that was perfect. That was the perfect, like, connection thematically to, you know, I thought it was just a really great little touch. It worked really well. The other obvious things to bring up, obviously, is the alligator in the water, who has laid eggs. So I don't know if the alligator in the water is meant to be, because I don't know how long do alligators live, Tim?
Great question. I have no idea. I imagine like honestly, I think alligators are kind of scary. So I imagine they're like one of those like infernal beasts that like will just live forever until like, you know, something else kills it.
Oh no, in the wild they can live up to 35 to 50 years, so okay. I have to assume that the gator in X is the offspring of the one in this then. Yeah, that makes more sense. It does say in captivity they can live from 65 to 80, so maybe if Pearl's like feeding it well.
Yeah, possibly.
Maybe, but yeah, okay, interesting. So yeah, the other thing as well, of course, is that Pearl loves to go to the movies, which again, silent film era. She likes the dancing, and one of the things that was playing early on is they never give you the name of him, but the projectionist starts like talking to her, and I thought, oh, maybe this will turn out to be her husband in the future, right? Because we never hear his name. Not that I remembered his name from the X anyway. It was Howard, which turns out, of course, to be her actual husband in this, because she's already married at the start. Her husband is off fighting in World War One. And that's kind of a running thing that's brought up throughout the movie. And given that her parents are German, obviously their heritage is brought up as well. But so she goes to see this projectionist because he comes in a little strong, and obviously he's a bit older, and it's like has he been a little predatory here? It's hard to tell, but at the same time, it's like we know Pearl's also quite predatory herself, so it's kind of a weird dynamic, but. He says, hey, you can come back and see stuff for free anytime. Just knock on this door and I'll let you in. Which is like, okay, you clearly like her, right? You're into her. Doesn't necessarily have to be predatory. It could just be, okay, he likes her and like whatever, right? And
he feels a little sleazy, but like, yeah, to be fair, he doesn't like, initiate like physical contact or anything, I guess. Like,
he definitely feels sleazy when she goes to see him. There's one thing particular that makes him feel sleazy to me. Is she goes into, so he's got this back room where he projects the films from the back of the theater, and she comes in and she's put on a dress to come and see him, and they're talking about stuff and what she wants to do and blah blah blah, and then he's like, hey, so what do you want to watch tonight? And she's like,
oh yeah,
this movie's, oh no, you've seen that before, how about something that no one else has seen? And she's like, okay. And he puts it on, and it turns out to be a very early porn movie. And so she's sort of like bent over looking through the
when they showed that scene, did you do like the Leo meme where you point at the screen, you're like, I recognize that one?
No. I might have made that same motion and went, Bush, I see Bush. But no, so she's watching this through like one of the holes up in the projection booth, right? And the way it's framed is he's kind of behind her, and I really thought he was going to start like unbuckling his belt and like, oh yeah, go for it, and I'm like, this is actually really creepy, dude. You just put on a porn without like permission, especially in a time period where she wouldn't necessarily know what that is because this doesn't really exist yet. It's kind of a new thing. And then but the thing that really stuck out to me though is afterwards he says, hey, you could be in movies like that. I was like, oh yeah, women love to hear that. You could do porn. Then he says, I'd pay to see it. Bit creepy, it's a bit.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is like an intentional thing to one, contrast how different she is from other women because he's the one that's really kind of in danger, but also the idea of like making you feel not super sympathetic when she eventually does decide to kill him. There's a little bit of that maybe.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. What were your thoughts? Did you think this was going to turn out to be the husband, that he was going to be into the killing, or like what were you feeling?
It's a little tough because since I'd already seen it before, I knew.
Well, I mean, the first time you watched it, Tim, not this time.
I know, but I don't remember my exact thoughts from that. That was like, a couple of months ago. So yeah, I honestly, I don't know what I remember thinking.
Excuse me for trying to prod some questions into you.
I'm sorry. Next time, I'll take notes when I know we're gonna record 4 months later or whatever.
Oh dear. So yeah, so they sort of build the thing. She ends up getting back to him at one point in the movie when she has like a fight with it's after it's after the real fight. Yeah, she's not quite dead yet, but yeah, it's after the real fight where her mother gets set on fire, which is probably the most visually spectacular death, I would say, is the fire. Yeah,
it's kind of shocking because like there's like one scene, where they're kind of like fighting and pushing up against each other, and like her dress is near like the fireplace or whatever, and you can kind of see it starting to catch fire. But then like in the next scene, she's like fully engulfed. Like she's like running around like just like a giant human torch.
Yeah, I mean, you say
wild.
next scene, it's really the very next shot. It just cuts
like
to the next
second.
shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, like obviously,
And it's kind of funny. She dumps the like soup or potatoes or like whatever.
Oh no, Joe,
was in the pot on her.
it was it was the boiling water the corn and the cobs were in.
All right.
because a couple of the corn and the cobs like sort of hit her. I was like, did you think boiling water would help the situation, Pearl? Did you think that was going to? Now, obviously, we know she's kind of murderous, so maybe she meant it. Maybe she's like, oh, I'll pretend like I'm helping. Oops! Oh, it's boiling water. I could never have predicted that. Maybe. I mean, this is the perfect time though to talk about her family life then and her parents and her relationship with her parents. So her dad's sick. He's in a wheelchair. He can't really move for himself. He can't speak. He's effectively just sitting there paralyzed like the entire time. He can like maybe swallow food, and that's about it. And there's a lot of weird stuff early on, which again sets up some of the more risque like themes that are in the film, where like she'll take a bath like in front of him, and the mother thinks this is weird. And she's like, "Well, I didn't want to waste the hot water." But she's she's bathing completely naked, and she's like, I don't know how much age she's maybe here, like 20, something like that.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it could be even be 80. I mean, people married young, like in this time period. But there's one scene when she's in the bath and she gets up and she just kind of like holds on, like she pinches him in the hand. He doesn't react, and then she starts squeezing his neck and basically just saying stuff like, "Well, maybe I should, put you out your misery," and like this is and, which actually leads to a really funny scene where she's going to throw him into the lake with the alligator, which maybe I'm sick for thinking that's funny, but it was Joe was making me think of Tim. See if you can guess what movie it was making me think of. A young person trying to dispose of an older person in a wheelchair.
Oh no, well, I know this isn't it, but I was thinking of Mac and Me. The kid in the wheelchair goes over the cliff.
No, I was thinking The Pit, but that's also a good guess. That's an excellent guess.
Yes, that's a very good one. Yeah.
So she's got him on the edge of the little pier, and she's like, you're loved, Dad. Don't worry, you're loved. But I think I should put you out your misery so I can leave this farm and not have to be stuck here. And it just so happens that the mother kind of catches, and like because she's been watched, she has to stop. But it sets up this thing that the mother is kind of aware that her daughter's got like homicidal tendencies, that she hurts animals, when she's not looking. Early on she takes a pitchfork to a goose to feed the alligator, and I think for a lot of the film you're kind of sympathetic for Pearl, because it feels like her mother is really strict on her, won't let her do anything she wants. It's like, no, your life is to work on the farm and just like eat to survive and no more, no fun, no dreams, no nothing. Which feels inappropriate, and it feels like really controlling. But then as we find out that she actually knows that Pearl's got like a dark side, and she has this like thirst to kill people, and it's been kind of growing. You hear this a lot with serial killers, that they start off with animals and they kind of escalate as time goes on. It's like, okay, we kind of understand a little bit better why she is so like controlling of her. So we get a lot of confrontations with them, which leads to her sneaking out to go see the projectionist and things like that. The big culmination of it though is when they just start fighting at dinner, where the mother is honest about what she's seen her do, and that you can't be in public with people because people might actually start to notice what you're really like. You might trick them for a while, but eventually they'll notice that you've got a dark side, and they get so fighty that they start pushing and shoving, and like you said, they're up next to the fireplace, and the mum's dress catches fire, and she engulfs in flames. And Pearl puts her in the basement. She's actually still alive for like a day though, because she's like banging on the door the next day when she comes back after having sex with the projectionist. So, yeah, fun times, as it were. And she just leaves the dad sitting at the dinner table overnight.
It's like true horror, if like you're looking at things like from the dad's perspective, like just being unable to move or speak or like warn anyone of any danger, and then like constantly having your daughter like say these weird, like crazy things to you.
I mean, from his perspective, like he's seen this take place, right? Pouring the hot water over to put out the fire. Yeah, great plan. And then she leaves. And when she comes back the next day, he's still sitting there in front of the dinner table, and she introduces him to what seems to be a new boyfriend. And obviously, this the projectionist doesn't know anything. He's just sort of being polite, but she's sort of hugging him, and the dad knows she's married to someone. Like it's the whole thing is just like it's equally like more of a comedy, but also more of a horror movie if you view it through his eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
Like it's so dark that it becomes kind of hilarious, just how ridiculous it is. But yeah, so and yeah, so yeah.
And then like I do think it is actually like this scene here, like once you kind of see the projectionist like once like kind of you see like the wheels starting to turn in his head that like something's not right with Pearl. It's actually like really funny, a lot of his like reactions, and you do kind of feel bad for him because like he just very clearly wants to leave, and it's not like the last time this happens too, where someone just wants to get away from Pearl.
No, it's a running theme in this movie.
Yeah. They just like those, and you know, kudos for. I feel like a lot of them kind of, you know, I feel like they're saying the right thing because you know they're not like being overly aggressive or anything, but they are trying to be like very reasonable and be like, oh, I'm really sorry, but yeah, I just gotta go. Like, what are you talking about? There's nothing's wrong with you. Like, I'm not mad at you. I gotta get back to work. You know, there's just please. But you know, like it's really good acting because like you can just tell like the underlying emotion is that they're like, dear God, like I need to get away from this woman.
Yeah, it kind of, you know, he hears some noises, which is the mother banging the door. She says it's a dog, and then they go out to the farmhouse, and she says a couple of other creepy things, including that she doesn't have a dog. And he's like, well, you just said you had a dog. And then he says,
and she didn't even try to like cover up and go like, oh no, I meant like we have a dog in the house, but not like a dog out here. Like she just doesn't even say anything.
Yeah, and then he just sort of says that he go back to work, and I think if he'd said something like, and because he says I'll see you later, and she's like when, and so if he just said he should have just made a plan. So well, how about you know tomorrow night? Like you know if he'd made a plan, maybe it would have smoothed things over a little bit. But she just started yelling because he sort of offhand mentioned, oh maybe you know we could travel to Europe together, and maybe that was bullshit. Maybe he just wanted a one night stand and he was going to ditch her. But the fact that he drove her home though, and willingly came in and met her parent, at least I think it says that maybe he was open to some kind of ongoing relationship, but then over the course,
if she wasn't crazy.
Yeah, but over the course of like a 5-minute period, she proved to be a complete psychopath.
Yeah.
So yeah, she just sort of yells like, are you ever going to take me to Europe, you liar, you something and she yells at the top of her lungs, and he just sort of stands there and goes, you're scaring me, Pearl.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really great, and it's and honestly, it's kind of like a I don't know. I hope this doesn't sound like crazy, but like I do find like Pearl like kind of like relatable in this scene though, because she's like,
I thought you were going to say attractive. You went even further than I thought you were going to say. Well, okay, on you go.
Well, just like I mean, obviously, like I haven't been in like situations exactly like this, but you know I've definitely been in situations where like you know I thought I was like good friends with someone, or even if you want to talk about like romantic partners, like I've gone on like back when I was single, and I would do more like I'd go on like online dates and stuff, and there'd be like a lot of times where I thought the date would go really well, and then I just like never hear back from the person or whatever. So like, you know, part of you does kind of want to go like what Pearl says. She's like you know, it's just on like, oh, well, what's wrong? Like what's different? Like now, like you said you liked me before, but now you don't. Like, I think there is something to that, to being like, oh yeah, like, you know, there are times when, you know, sometimes you're in a situation like that and you kind of just want to blurt that out. But usually you're, you know, at least for me, I'm like, it's too awkward to actually say that stuff. But
of course. And by saying it, you're just confirming that you're not worth revisiting, basically.
Right. Yeah. Like if
you're too unhinged.
Yeah, like the more you talk, the more it's like less likely they're gonna actually maybe, you know, come back later or change their mind or something.
I'm realizing a lot of parallels here with this scene, this section of the film in particular, in Banshees of Inisherin.
Oh, good film.
Yes.
Is it weird that like I saw like a lot of people saying like, oh man, like this movie's the Banshees of I never know how to say it. I always forget. Inshiram or whatever.
Shinnerin, I think.
Inshinerin. I saw so many people being like, "Oh man, it's a great movie, but it's so dark." And like after I watched, I was like, "Actually, I thought it was kind of funny." Like,
oh, it's really funny. But there's like a dark undertone to it, is what
Yeah.
what it's about. Yeah. Are we rowing? That's not an Irish accent. That's just me doing a voice to indicate that I'm not doing my voice. I can't do an Irish accent.
Honestly, I feel like if people want to know the future of this podcast, I think if they watch the Banshees,
that's just such an obvious joke for you to make. This is so obvious.
I mean, that's all it's gonna be. Someday you're just gonna log on, and I'm just gonna not be there. And...
Wait, what? Wait, hold on. Why are you the one who's ignoring me? Why isn't it me ignoring you?
Well, I think, you're the one that's a bit more dull. I'm the one that'll be going off trying to create like the perfect comic book or something.
How dare you? I look forward to receiving some fingers. Anyway, so yeah, I think one of the things we have to talk about Pearl, particularly in the like her sexual desires, because obviously sex is a big theme of X, and it is a theme here as well. It's not as it's not at the forefront in this one, but it is definitely there. This idea that she is sexually repressed, active, and to the point where she's so horny after her first meeting with the projectionist that she dry humps a scarecrow.
Hell yeah.
Like she goes into like a cornfield, takes a scarecrow, and she's like dancing with it at first, and then starts kissing it, imagines it's the projectionist, gets mad because she's married and says, "I'm married," and then starts dry humping it. And I'm like, okay, you've got some built up tension in there. I feel like
give them both the Oscar right now.
What, her and the scarecrow?
Yeah, this is a great scene.
It was a good scene. I'm not denying it was a good scene, but it's hard not to look at a woman dry humping a scarecrow and think, damn, she's thirsty.
It's true. Scarecrow was kind of hot though.
He had a very textured quality to him. Yes.
Yeah. I actually did think he was kind of creepy, which made the scene work even better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a mix of things, because obviously the film builds up to her big monologue later on where she talks about how she didn't really like feel anything for the guy she married. She married her husband because she thought he would take her away from the farm, and it kind of like builds this idea that the sexual like frustration and the built up tension was maybe something that already existed even when he was around. Like, yeah, maybe she had sex with him, but maybe it wasn't fulfilling like her actual needs.
Well, we know that she did have sex with him, because later she talks about getting pregnant.
True, yes. Okay, so they definitely had sex at least once. Yeah, very true. But it does feel like there's this, and obviously I think the pairing of the desire to kill and the desire for sex, obviously I think, because for most killers, killing is like a sexual act of some kind. It's something they get off on.
All right, if you say so, I'll take your word for it.
I'm not speaking from experience, Timothy. How dare you? No, so yeah, so there's all these like teases and the tension building up, and all these little ticks in her performance as these things are happening. We get introduced to her sister-in-law and kind of her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law's at a distance. In fact, her mother-in-law tries to give Pearl's mother a pig, like a dead pig, like a roast as a gift, and she leaves it on the porch, and it just like collects maggots and shit. And then at the end, she actually puts it on the table with the family, and it's like really disgusting. But we meet her sister-in-law.
Good horror visual.
Oh sure, yeah. It's almost like the house is starting to become the Texas Chainsaw style house at the end. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
But she meets her mother, or her sister-in-law, sorry, and she's like this, slightly ditzy but kind of upper class blonde woman who's like, oh, they're doing auditions for this dancing thing. I would really like to win it. They're going to tour like a couple of states or something with this dancing show. And Pearl sees this as her chance, and she wants to go to it. And it is, she says she wants to practice a couple of times, but we never actually see her actually practice, which I thought was an interesting choice. It was, because I think part of it is that when she eventually gets the no, we're not looking, we're looking for someone else, not really you. And it's this big, we get this big dance sequence where she's dancing and the background becomes like a big proper like background drop to what she's doing. And it's this big performance, and Mia Goth's putting her heart and soul into it. And then she stops in her final pose and the guy just says, yeah, sorry, you're good, but we're not what we're looking for.
I do have a question about that scene.
Well, I was going to say that moment, I think that the idea that she expected this and just assumed that she would get it and without seemingly even really practicing, from what we can tell, I think there's like an entitlement and like a delusion quality to it. It's not that she's practice is really good and just didn't quite get it. There's kind of a delusional element to it. But yeah, what do you say, Tim?
Oh, just like I was curious with the dance number, like, is she supposed to be good or not? Because it does like end up turning into like a really cool sequence once you have like the kind of the background and stuff like come in.
But that's all in her head.
Yeah. So like when she's actually like dancing in front of them, like it looks a little silly to me, but also I don't know what dancing was like around this time. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the one thing I was having trouble with is like, all right, is she supposed to be good, but just not what they're looking for? Or is it like, oh yeah, she's embarrassingly like kind of bad?
It looked in time, and I mean, I can't really judge dancing either beyond the layman's, first look at it. But she starts crying immediately, and
she's
saying,
like wailing.
yeah, so I'm a star, and this all builds up to the monologue because the sister-in-law, she's only in a couple of scenes. She's in the scene where we first meet her, and then she's in this scene outside waiting to go in, and afterwards where she takes her home. She's like, well, let me take you home, Pearl, because Pearl's just sitting there crying. And when they get home, and it's a really good mirroring of X, because X has that scene where they're sitting having the lemonade or whatever it is in the kitchen, and it's very intentionally kind of a callback to that, where they're sitting down, there's a couple of glasses of like milk or something already sitting on the table, and Mia Goth, like at first, like it cuts back to the sister-in-law a couple of times, but then once she gets into it more and more, the camera just stays in a close-up of Mia Goth the entire time, and it's just her acting her heart out. She's blubbering and she's talking. She's admitting that she had an affair with some guy, even though it was one. She's admitted she's killing people. She admits that she didn't really care about her husband. It was just like she hated living on the farm with her parents. She thought, oh, this husband who's from a nice family will take me away back to their place and I'll have a nicer life. And the sad part about all this, of course, this self-realization is that, first of all, it's legitimately quite funny when it finally cuts back to the sister-in-law and she sits there quietly for like 30 seconds just moving her hands and then goes, I think I need to go. That legitimately, I found that quite funny. But one of the things her mother said to her earlier on was that people will eventually realize what you are. And I think that's the really interesting part of this, is that her finally unloading all this means that her sister-in-law is seeing who she really is, and she is scared of her by the end of the scene. And it's like, it's just proving her mother right. And like, it's this realization that she was right, and I'm doomed to be this and not be a star because of that. And obviously the sister-in-law leaves, and we get broad daylight. Pearl just walks out with an axe, and the sister-in-law starts running, and Pearl just chases her down and starts whacking her in the back with an axe as she begs to spare her life. And of course she doesn't, because
Yeah, I mean, altogether, a great scene. I mean, the monologue is great. Mia Goth does a good job, and it's kind of crazy like how long it keeps going on. Like, just kind of when you think like, all right, maybe she's gonna wrap it up. Like, she brings up some new like thing to unload about, and it's a lot of stuff that like people in polite society like wouldn't say that today, but like imagine like people are so like repressed like in that time period that all the things she's saying must be like it's just like so confounding, like who would ever say this, like, oh my gosh. And then I mean, like you said,
to put it in context, the movie's 103 minutes long, and this monologue I checked was 8 minutes. That's basically 8% of the whole movie is just this one speech from her. That's actually quite funny. Like that puts it in perspective, like just her sitting there holding because what's so funny is that it's very impressive from a performance perspective, and you know, we knew that she's had a husband this whole time, but we've never really heard anything about him. Like, we don't really know anything about the husband. Like, there's
it's not
this,
really a character. Like,
no, there's this looming idea that he might come back or he might get killed in the war, but like, we don't really know anything about him. So this was actually quite interesting, finally hearing all this, and like this is the backdrop to like what this story is. Because when you first meet Pearl at the start of the movie, it's like, okay, she's daydreaming about dancing. Her mother tells her to snap out of it because this is your life. And it's like, oh wait, she's married already? Because it felt like a teenager living with her parents. And then it's like, oh no, she did almost get away, or she thought she was going to get away, and she's still trapped here. And I hate him for that. I hate Howard for that. So it turns out that the soldier husband is actually the husband from X. And that tells you that this little final scene where he comes back from the war, and he comes in and he sees the dead parents, and she's standing there saying she's happy he's home. Because, her final line before he comes back is, to quote her mother, is, I'm making the best with what I have. Like, that's her, that's what the mother said to her, is you don't want things, you make the best with what you have, and that's what she's doing. What's funny is that having seen X, we know that he, like, supports what she is and helps her with the killing, and it's a oddly romantic relationship and sexual relationship for a pairing where... he does just come back. There almost is room for a whole other movie here where we see how he turns into like being okay with this.
That's why I was kind of curious, like if they ever wanted to do. It's kind of funny because everything's like in the X universe, but you could almost have like Pearl as its own separate, like series or whatever. So
or just call it Howard.
Yeah,
Howard. Actually, Howard the cuck.
That's pretty good. But yeah, I think that there's gonna at least definitely be a little bit more room to, even though he's not as big a character, as Pearl was in X, I feel like it would still be interesting maybe to see a little bit of how he got this way, or how he was okay with it, or whatever they had to do to kind of.
I'm not even saying I want it per se, but I think there is potentially enough story to like tell. Sure. How does he become okay with this to the point where he's willing to do this with her, and that he does actually genuinely love her, and it does put a different spin on their relationship from X as well, knowing that it started out with her just kind of faking that she cared about him because she wanted to get away. This was like a marriage of like convenience. It was a marriage of something she wanted rather than because she actually felt things for him. Then you compare that to what the relationship is like. I guess in a way that she did make the best with what she had, and that she actually ended up loving her husband. At least that's what it seemed like in X. So that's kind of interesting actually. But the monologue's great. It kind of feels like. The fact that the actor was involved in like the creation process and produced the movie and all that, it does kind of feel like she's like, I want to show my chops. I want an uninterrupted 8-minute monologue where I get to just act, and people are going to be floored. And what's so funny about it is obviously that takes a lot of effort from her as an actor. But as far as like movie making goes, it's the cheapest shot. Not even just the cheapest shot. It is the cheapest 8 minutes of making a movie ever, because literally all you have in the background is an out of focus wall. That's it. Like, it's just her face. Like, this is the cheapest shot to actually make. The cameraman's not even having to move anything. It's a stationary shot. Like, this is for everything else in the movie, this is the easiest shot. There's no editing to do. There's no movement. There's no work on set. It's just all on Mia Goth. You don't have to worry about
CGIing any mustaches off of her.
Oh, they did. That's what makes it most impressive, Tim.
Oh yeah.
She shot this whole movie with a mustache. It was because it was November, you see.
Oh yeah.
She let it grow in. So.
Obviously, that's a Justice League joke. If anyone didn't get that, but
I like how that explains it for anyone who doesn't know it well enough. There's like, what do you mean Justice League? It's a whole thing. Just go with it. Yeah. No. And then even the final shot, the credits play out over her face as she just sort of stands there, sort of smiling awkwardly and crying.
It's kind of funny.
It's a little funny. It doesn't last the whole credits though. It lasts a good chunk of them, and all I could think is she kept doing it as long as she could, and this was the longest take, so that's why they eventually do the circle, the black circle closing in to finish it. I can only imagine that this was the longest version she did, and they used it, but that was it. Like, so, which is still impressive. Don't get me wrong. It lasts a while. It's a long shot.
Yeah.
Just holding it in her face, switching between emotions like fake happiness and inner pain and tears.
I think there's like a couple of times, yeah, like tears start coming down, and I'm wondering if they were like real tears just from like holding your face that long, like.
And she does blink a couple times. It's not a no blinking thing, but that's okay. That's not what we're here to judge on.
So a couple of things. So one with the sister-in-law,
mm-hmm.
you know, when they're talking at the table, do you think that she actually did get the part in the dance troupe, or do you think she was kind of just like, you know, when Pearl was getting angry and saying like, "Don't lie to me, I know you got it." Like, do you think she was just trying to kind of do whatever she wanted, you know, go along with whatever she said and be like, "Okay, yeah, I did."
Yeah, for the context here, so when she got turned down, they said, "Oh, we've got a bunch of girls like you already. We want like a young blonde American, all American girl, right?" And she assumes that her sister-in-law is going to get the part, and she says, "You know, you got the part," and she's like, "No." And honestly, the no sounded believable enough that I kind of just believed her. So yeah. I actually did have the thought, like when she says, "No, don't lie to me, damn it! Like, just tell me you got the part. It's okay." I did have that thought where I went, "Is this actually the truth, or is she saying yes because she thinks she'll get angry if she keeps saying no, even though that's the truth?"
Right. Yeah.
But I don't know. She also felt genuine when she said it. That I thought, nah, she probably did then.
Yeah.
She probably did. Maybe it works that it's kind of ambiguous. It's like, is she lying to save her ass or not? You know, it's kind of. But yeah. I love that she says, "It's okay. You can tell me. I'm not mad. I'm happy for you." And she's like, "Yeah, I got the part. I'm excited for it. You always get everything you want." That was the very next thing she said, and it made me laugh. Like, it's that sort of thing where she'll flip on a, you know, so quickly that it sometimes it is darkly quite funny how she'll just flip to being a psychopath instantly.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's what's interesting, both, you know, with her and the projectionist and stuff, is like the things that they're saying, they feel like in the moment that they are the right things to say, that you would, you know, try to do to like kind of calm a person down that seems like they're on edge, but you know, neither one it ends up working out for them. Like, it just kind of makes her angry, and maybe she would get angry at, like, you know, anything you say, so maybe there's no winning, but yeah, it's kind of funny.
It's just, yeah, it's done really well at the end because she actually makes it out the door, but then Pearl just like casually starts walking after her with the axe, and
this is a really good shot. Like, yeah. I love this whole sequence, and like, yeah, the camera is, you know, basically just following them down the road. I guess they're kind of following the camera or whatever. Yeah,
it's one shot looking at the sister-in-law, so she's trying to walk away quicker, and it turns into more of a run, and Pearl's walking up behind her, so we're just looking at the front of her the entire time, like going back down this road. And yeah, it's very well done. Like, you feel Pearl coming for you, basically. It's got these like really standout sequences, and it is more of a character piece. But it did have more production value than I thought it might, because it was like just sort of like, hey, let's make this movie. But you know, it had like an old school car. It had, because even the theater that she goes to, admittedly, it's not much of a place, but like. The scene in the alleyway where she first meets the projectionist, like, I noticed that the vivid color scheme, like all the pipes in this alleyway were all different colors, which there's no way they just found that. There was no way that was just an alleyway somewhere that has all these bright colored pipes. Like, they at the very least painted some pipes to give it the color scheme that they wanted.
Yeah.
If not something else. But it did a good job of never making me feel like I was watching something that was like struggling for money, even though I can't imagine it had that much of a budget either.
Yeah, I mean, especially, you know, well, I think the big thing is like they were able to save money because they're using, like, you know, the same crew in the same location, so like, you know, that definitely helped. But yeah, you'd still need, you know, some money.
Yeah, there were still other things there, you know. There's no budget listed on IMDb, sadly.
I think I would imagine though, like, X probably didn't have like a super big budget, so I don't know if it's just like, no. If it was just the fact of like,
that's the weird thing. If anything, X feels like the cheaper movie because it needs less. Like, I mean, it has like an old school van, I guess, but like it feels like it needs less things to make it look authentic. So yeah. So,
but maybe like it was so low budget that like it wasn't that big of a deal to be like, all right, let's just throw them another like million or whatever to, make the second one. I don't know.
Yeah, what's interesting is that this had a different aspect ratio to X, which, so X was like 1.85 to 1, give or take, which is a ratio that was really common, especially more going out of the 80s than, but it's kind of similar to Texas Chainsaw, which is like 1.66 to 1 and stuff like that. And I thought that was an intentional choice. So I noticed at the start of this, when it went wider to the scope kind of widescreen, I was like, oh, they're going for more of a cinematic thing. What's interesting, though, is that if anything, I would have done the opposite, because I'd have went 4:3 if they could gotten away with it, because movies at that time were in 4:3. But they instead went for the more cinematic to make it feel more like a dream by our standards rather than the character standards. So I get why the choice was made. So I'd be curious to see what Maxine ends up being, because I know that 1.85 was definitely more common in the 80s than the other ratio. So we'll see. But
cool. One thing that we really didn't talk about, and I mean, I don't know if there is much to talk about, but the fact that they do like the whole thing with the was it the like influenza that was going around?
Oh, no, that's just worth talking about. Yeah, so basically they picked a time period where there was actually a pandemic going on. So there's a lot of references to a pandemic and wearing a mask and not wanting to catch something. And this was effectively made during the pandemic. So it's kind of funny, actually, because I just watched Glass Onion like just before Christmas. And
nice, yeah.
That was set during the pandemic, and they actually do a lot of pandemic-y references in it, where they're wearing masks and stuff, and they're referencing that they're all in lockdown. And so it's just interesting that this sort of does it as well, but from the tactic of, no, we're going to set it in the past in a different pandemic.
Yeah. I thought it was like an interesting idea, but it just, I don't know, it didn't really feel like it went anywhere other than like characters referencing it, which, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because, it gives it like a little extra flavor and stuff to, be that specific, but I don't know, like, to me, it's like, well, it doesn't seem like there was like a larger context or anything to it.
I guess one is that if you're setting it in 1918 anyway, because that's when your movie's like, it fits timeline wise, then maybe it's just a coincidence and they went, hey, there was a pandemic then, we should make some references because it's kind of relevant right now. Two, I mean, the way it played into the characters more than anything was it played into the like the mother's like protective thing where she's like, hey, you can't go there, or you went somewhere public today, like the movie theater. When she finds out she went to the theater, she's like, oh, you have to go sleep in the barn for like the night to make sure you don't have any symptoms so I don't get sick. I don't know if it's this idea that the mother is like, doesn't actually care about the pandemic per se, but she's using that as an excuse to try and keep her daughter away from other people so that she won't be a harm to them, kind of thing. So it's almost like she's like gaslighting Pearl into like no, Pearl's the disease, Pearl's the virus, and she's trying to keep from other people. Maybe they're doing something. Maybe they'll try to like do a flippy thing like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm reaching there. If anything, it's just that maybe they realized, oh shit, there was a pandemic in this time period. We should reference it.
Yeah. No, I thought it was interesting, but yeah, it's just funny to see it there and be like, oh yeah, like this is something that's happened before, and it seemed like, people, I don't know, like, I don't want to get into anything. Actually, I guess it's like too big of a discussion.
What a tease. Tim was bordering on a spicy hot take there, and
it's just, I don't know, it's just funny being like, oh yeah, like this stuff has happened before, and like, hey, here's a thing like we can do the help mitigate things, and then people nowadays just refuse to follow any of this stuff. It's just weird.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If anyone has like a greater thematic reason for the references to the plague, the pandemic, by all means, comment and give us your thoughts and feelings on the matter.
Yeah. I also like when she like keeps taking her dad's medicine.
Yeah. Also, there's a really disgusting scene actually. Like, see, because obviously the end of the movie, after she kills the sister-in-law, before the husband gets back from war, she gets her parents' dead bodies and props them up at the dinner table, and puts the disgusting like pig from the outside on the table. And that's, you know, where it kind of says the end, and then, or it doesn't say the end yet, but it's sort of like, it says something, and then it goes to the sort of the epilogue with the husband arriving. There's a really disgusting part of that when she's preparing the mother, where she's brushing the mother's hair, like her corpse's hair, and there's like bits of her scalp like coming off with the hair and the brush. It's like, oh, that's actually quite nasty. What are you doing? Come on, Pearl. Have you no shame?
I thought it was just like a nice visual when to at the audition, you know, like when they were like, you know, telling her to get off the stage, but yeah, her like envisioning her like dead mother's corpse as like one of the judges, you know, just a nice little horror touch, gives a nice little flavor to the scene.
When it cuts back to them the second time after she's already seen her mother, all four of them change. Like one's her father, one's the projectionist, and one's her husband. So it's like all of her relevant characters are suddenly the judges, and that's who's telling her she's a failure. It's the people in her life who have been saying she can or can't do this stuff, are the ones that are the judges ultimately. So I think that's the idea there, is that, you know, she feels so defeated and rejected, and she's been saying all movie like, oh, my mother like will learn that I actually am special, that I can do things, and then she's just had this like, you know, slap of reality, and she feels like that's who's really judging her in this moment, is all these people who said she couldn't do it, or in her mind pretended that she could do it but didn't really mean it, i.e. the projectionist, or let her down, the husband, so on and so on. So yeah, it's a fun little moment. No, it's good. It's a good little movie, honestly. Like it's a nice little character piece, good direction, good performance from Mia Goth. It enriches the backstory of the character for the other film, but its real strength is that it's so different.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. So Tim, what are you rating Pearl out of 10?
I think I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, especially after the second watch, you know, my feelings for it went a bit higher, but yeah, it's a really nice little you know side piece to X that's, you know, just like a very different style, but, you know, again, it works and informs a lot of the character that we see in that movie, and yeah, it's a nice character study. There's yeah, some really cool, interesting moments, but yeah, it doesn't like skimp on the kind of the horror or the freakiness of, you know, not even like, you know, the necessarily the violent scenes, but just like the, you know, like the whole scarecrow scene is just like, you know, such like a weird kind of otherworldly thing that there's like a creepiness factor there, which is nice. So
it definitely,
yeah, a very solid movie.
Yeah, that scarecrow scene, and then obviously the ending when she's propping up the dead parents, it really does feel like it's the girly version of Texas Chainsaw. You know, it's a character who's willing to like use dead bodies for stuff and is like doing weird. Like it feels like this is a more girlified but still very much demented Texas Chainsaw style character, sort of being born.
Yeah, and that's another. I mean, that's kind of another thing, like where, it would be kind of cool to see this become like a bigger franchise with, you know, maybe you don't need like 12 movies or whatever, but, you know, get a couple more movies, just because, you know, there's not a lot of horror where like the main, you know, villain is like a female, so it'd be kind of interesting, you know, to have this you know, kind of female representation in horror, I think.
Oh yeah, truly the poster child for equality is a woman can be an axe murderer too, a deranged cannibal axe murderer sex fiend.
Yeah, hey, you know, a woman can kill horny teens at a summer camp just as easily as any deformed hulking male figure can.
Yeah. Which I'd probably have sex with them first, like, because in X she tries to have sex with one of them, and obviously the guy's like, "Hey, what the hell? What are you doing? You're like 80," and it does make me assume that as she's luring victims when she's younger, that she probably did have sex with a lot of the victims up until they sort of stopped wanting to at some point. Sure. You know,
yeah.
Whenever that might have been. So it's almost like a really dark, demented look at like the idea of like beauty and age and like losing it. I mean, it already kind of was in X, but just from that perspective of the idea of like at a certain point she stopped being desirable to young men, and like the depressing side of that, if indeed it is depressing to you, but clearly it is to Pearl. She put a lot of stock into being young and beautiful and remembering her glory days. That's a big part of X. Oh well. So yeah, well, my rating. I think I agree with the 8. I think it's really solid. Like, there's not a lot to complain about. It's a really good character piece. Yeah. Some good standout moments, standout monologue. I love the touch of her walking on the X at the audition. Just really nice. So, yeah, good. It went in really quick as well. I've been watching so many like 2-hour plus movies recently, including horror films, that it was nice to just have a nice 100-minute, tightly paced film.
It's also nice because I feel like a lot of times we'll play catch up like at the end of the year, beginning of a new year, trying to catch all the movies from the previous year like that we didn't get to, and a lot of times I feel like they're usually like the more worse kind of annoying movies that like we didn't want to go out to theaters to see or whatever. So it is kind of nice though. Like the last couple of weeks, I feel like we've been doing like a pretty good crop of stuff that.
Been
fun.
And a lot of the other middling stuff we just kind of watched separately and talked about on even more streams, which is the bonus show you can get on Patreon at the $5 tier if you want to hear us. It's not on just now. It's off until Tim's back from having a second kid. Like Arnold and Junior, Tim's giving birth later this year.
Yes.
Yep. So good luck with that, Timmy. But no, that is our thoughts on Pearl. So by all means, let us know what you think of the movie in the comments below. You can like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and of course you can support all the content, as I said, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses. There's bonus episodes. Again, not new ones right now until Tim's back sometime late in the year. But there's a back catalogue of bonus episodes, there's a back catalogue of even more streams, plus there's new bonus content for the other movie shows from Mail Fuzz Movies, such as the Atomic Cinema Experiment, our sci-fi movie podcast, and the Collector's Cut, which is the show I did with David, where we work through franchises and sort of seasons of movies. So we're doing 70s disaster movies throughout January, which is probably done by the time you get this, but, so nice little season of reviews to go check out, and so look, check out all the other stuff. Rate us on your podcast app of choice.
Yeah, and if you haven't heard those Even More Screams episodes before, they're not like necessarily like of the moment. Like you can still go back and listen to and enjoy them. Like we'll usually have like a little quiz or something, and then like talk about random movies we've seen, but they're not always like brand new movies or whatever. So if people are worried about them being too timely and stuff, you can still listen to them even if you haven't before.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So it's just our quick sort of spoiler-free thoughts on a lot of different random horror movies that we've been watching off show. So
we usually go into tangents and stuff, and they're pretty meaty episodes. Like I think the idea to do them was to just do like quick 30-minute things, but I think they usually end up being like over hour and a half long.
Yeah, it ended up being more of like a casual monthly catch-up than it was the quick thing. But yeah, and there's a show called Meltdown that me and Tara do, similar idea with other genres of movies, also on Patreon at the $5 tier. So yeah, I'll just take this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you very much to Tyler Heston, the Palacios, David Sharp, Boardnow, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Al Treisman. Thank you to those all for being some of our higher tiers, but thank you to all of our patrons and YouTube members and anyone who just watches and listens to the content. All of it does help. Also check out the Discord, link in the description. Check us out on social medias at Screams Midnight. Yep, that's about us. Thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.